The Gentlementor.
My hardest part of childhood, and I've had this question for a couple weeks, so I've had to think this over, and I've been thinking about what's the hardest part of fatherhood. And I thought of like lots of things that you should look out for and things you should avoid, things like what we've been talking about. And it wasn't until the other day I was flipping through. We got a new subscriber on the Instagram, and he's a father.
Excellent. Welcome.
He's a father of 6, and I know this because his handle on Instagram is father to 6.
Welcome, Dad.
And he's putting up,
Thank you.
yeah, he's putting up great motivational stuff and positive thoughts for dads and lots of good stuff. And he said something the other day. He put up this post, and I went, "Oh, there it is." The hardest part of being a father is, for me, in my opinion, managing expectations. Which sounds like it doesn't even mean anything because it's so clinical. Expectations. So you get married, there are expectations about what you are supposed to do as a husband and some things you're not supposed to do as a husband. But you get this other set of expectations that come along with it. Things that she expects, things that her family expects, things that your family expects, things that you expect of yourself. Where do those expectations come from? Is it something you saw on TV? Is it something you saw on social media? Where does it come from? So many of the expectations that we struggle with, and we wear them like burdens. I think of the old, it's that time of year. We think of the Christmas Carol with Ebenezer Scrooge, and Marley comes to visit. He's got those chains and boxes on him. And I imagine that. Just junk that we're weighing around. We're carrying this stuff around for no reason. And all it is us trying to view ourselves through the eyes of other people. The legitimate expectations. I have a wife, so I'm married and I'm faithful. And she is my concern, and I'm providing for her. And then we have children, and I need to provide for them, and they need food, and they need clothing. These are all legitimate expectations. Here are things that are not. Disneyland, iPhone. These are not.
Right.
I felt like such a derelict parent because my kids got a cell phone way after everybody else did, and iPhones way after that. And I felt terrible about that. And then I started looking at all the expectations and went, well, why do you feel terrible? Well, because wait a minute, why should my kids have that? Why do I think my kids should have that? Who told me that?
Yeah.
Who made me believe that? Well, I made me believe it. Based on what I saw around me, based on, keeping up with the Joneses, if nothing else. You'll wear yourself thin and worry yourself to death trying to meet a bunch of expectations that aren't legitimate. It's great if you can go to Disneyland and get your kids iPhones and Nikes. That's wonderful. Awesome stuff.
Yeah.
But because they don't have it or you can't afford it, doesn't mean that you're not a good parent or that they're not having a happy and fulfilling childhood. It's just not true.
That's really good. That's good.
They can have just as meaningful a childhood without any of that stuff.
Sure.
I rue the day that I provided electronics to my children because society was telling me, or I was believing the lie that society was telling me that children needed to have this technology.
Yep.
I can tell you that technology did nothing but trouble my children.
That's absolutely right.
And I wish I would have waited longer.
Yep.
So don't buy into the expectation game. That would be, to me, the hardest part of fatherhood because everything around you is pointing expectations at you.
Yep.
Soccer, church, school, sports, more school, college savings, insurance. It's all yelling at you. Don't buy it. Sit down, you and your wife, and decide what is really important. What are the real expectations? That we have a loving home where our children are educated and taught to respect other human beings.
Come on, somebody.
Doesn't cost a lot. Takes a lot of effort.
It's actually free.
Free of charge, a lot of effort.
Yeah.
You will actually have to interact. You'll have to interact with your children instead of plugging them into an electronic device.
Oh no.
There's the downside. Yeah. To me, that was the hardest part, and it took me till almost the end of it before I stopped hating myself, because it was a hate fest. Because you hate yourself. I'm not doing the things I need to be doing for my kid, and then I realized, wait. Where did all these expectations come from? And you don't even realize because you start to gather them, this subtle kind of collection of them. Yeah. And suddenly you can't breathe anymore because you can't meet everyone's expectations. It's like,
and that sucks. As an individual, you can't meet people's expectations.
No. It's murder. But I would if you were going to avoid something, I would advise you to avoid that.
So I would agree with your answer being one of the hardest part of being a father. That's the question, right? Is managing expectations. Because one of my favorite marriage counselors, who was my personal counselor for a while, who told me, "Hey, it sucks to be you." It's not something you want to hear from your counselor, but when your counselor says that most marital problems are caused because of unmet expectations, that's exactly what it is. And I would also agree that because most parental problems are due to the fact of unmet expectations. So if you can manage those expectations, both on your end and your child's end, then you're going to avoid a lot of those issues and a lot of those problems.
I'll see your whatever you just said,
Excellent.
and I'll raise you.
I call.
I think most of life's problems, most of the things that make us miserable, not real problems, the things that make us miserable, mostly false expectations.
Agreed. Unmet expectations.
I think we're done here. If you can't parent successfully now,
our
there's no hope for
expectations
you.
are here.
Give it up.
This is the realist. Yeah.
Consider adopting a pet. Here we go. We'll just extend this question one further. If that wasn't broad enough, here we go.
Go for it. Let's move.
This is from a dear friend of the show.
Dear friend of the show.
What's the scariest part of becoming a father?
Ooh, what's the scariest part?
True. All the part that happens after the fun part. Was there any moment in it that didn't strike you with panic?
No.
I mean, the first ultrasound was pretty and that kind of takes away all your fear, and you're like,
Yeah.
And when they finally come out, there's but man, it seems like there's a lot of being scared in between there.
The first hearing the heartbeat.
The moment of reality.
The moment of reality, when you hear the heartbeat, it's like, oh my gosh, there's actually another human being who's going to be dependent on.
And maybe she just had a couple of beers.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a tough one. I'm going to say my vote is, what's the scariest part about being a father? I'm going to say across the board, everything. Is that fair?
It would be hard to pick a thing. I can point out some scary moments, but yeah, the whole thing's been fairly terrifying.
Right.
It's like you're given the most complicated thing on earth to operate and no manual.
Exactly. And no training.
You leave the hospital and there's a nurse and she's like, stick the key there and turn that thing and I think everything will be fine. Right. You'll be all right.
They
won't break them.
How to put the seat in the car and fasten it. We do all of that stuff in the car, and it's like
the food goes in here, the poop comes out here, the car seat goes like this. Bye.
How much parenting happens in the car? Man, that's a tough one.
Probably shockingly more than we'd like to admit.
Well, that's true too. That's very true.
I think of scary moments. I think of the moment of the pregnancy test, the moment of the ultrasound, the moment when the doctor said, "Hand me the suction," and put her foot up on the footboard of the bed and put the suction on my newborn child's head, and with her foot on the footboard started removing her from the birth canal. That was really terrifying.
Man, I'm gonna have to go with
all of that pales in comparison to the stuff that came after they you get a buffer there until they hit school, and at school the terror starts again, and it just ramps up continually because you know where they're heading. You've been a teenager, you know what that is, and so at that point I start trying to warn them. Boys, evil. Trust me, they're just evil.
Which includes you, and that's going to go back to the previous question.
Yeah. Well, one of the hardest things about parenting is not realizing that everything you're doing is being recorded to be used against you in a court of law that will continue for the rest of your life.
That's tough.
You have the hardest part of fatherhood: witnesses. Lots of witnesses.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you could just not tell anybody about the mistakes you've made, but there were people there and they saw you and they'll bring them up again. But we're
I'm
on scary.
I'm gonna go back.
Scary.
I want to go back to a letter that I wrote sitting on my computer late one night.
Ooh,
when
sounds interesting.
When I found out that I was going to be a father, I wrote this letter to my daughter, which unfortunately we didn't have cloud computer.
It's been gone. It's
access.
gone.
So
It got deleted. You didn't have a
forever,
backup.
So, yeah, I didn't have a backup. So the letter that I remember typing out late one night sitting at the computer was, how am I ever going to afford? I can't even afford to feed the two mouths, the three mouths, my wife and my dog and myself. How am I going to afford feeding you as well? And I'm glad she will never read that letter.
I am too. I'm glad I'll never read it.
It's a terrible letter.
And yet you felt completely confident and assured in telling me that, oh, well, now that I've got a kid, you should have one too.
You know what? Well, screw you, because you had two anyway. So
I got a dog. I got a desperation dog.
Those were the fears that I had in my mind when I realized I was going to be a dad at 24, 25 years old. I was like, oh my gosh, who in the world thought that it was a good idea that I should be a dad? And so I was fearful of the financial issue of it.
It's terrifying.
Yeah, it is. It's
terrifying. All they do is tell you how many millions of dollars it takes to raise a kid and put them through college.
Right.
If it would have come down to that alone would have prevented me from having a kid.
Right. But 23 years later, I had to think for a minute, 23 years later, I think back and I look back at that night that I typed that on my computer. That was a Windows 3.1 computer probably at that moment. I realized, does that hold the weight to what I am seeing her do today? No, absolutely not. Those fears, those hard things that that I encountered through those 23 years are pale in comparison to what she's become. And that's a testament to her.
It is. And it's a testament to God. Because if this had been me, somebody somewhere would have a copy of that letter. And it would probably show up special delivery right now.
Probably.
Telegram.
Somebody would call and read it to you right now.
Did you type this letter? Oh, Mark's letter got lost. There was no cloud storage.
But we have Doug's letter. And let's read it. Here we go.
Okay, and here he is on video.
They would unroll it like a scroll.
Yeah. Here he is screaming it from the top of the building.
But I know you feel the same way because you're looking at look at your daughters and like where they are at in comparison to what you've done. You're like, what the hell? Where did you get that? We're dropping parenting advice. I thought of some really great things today. Okay. Good. I'm glad because
my first parenting strategy was born out of sheer rebellion.
Isn't that everybody's parenting strategy?
I don't know.
I am never going to treat my kids this way.
We have discussed
this. I'm never going to to my kids.
We have discussed this in regard to the young man who called previously. His mother was, I'm going to raise my kids to be my best friend. And I knew, even as a child, that don't work. No. But I also knew that what my parents had done was not exactly the thing either. And I rose my children. I rose my children.
Reared.
Raised.
It's the bourbon.
Raised my children.
Scotch.
I wish you would cut it out. You wouldn't have drink it. We got to stop.
Scotch.
Got to cut it out. I've had enough of it.
No.
I'm calling an end to this podcast if this drinking continues.
Okay.
I'm sorry, man, if the drinking doesn't continue. Back to seriousness. What was I saying? I was saying a thing. I feel like I was saying a thing.
When you have reared your children.
Reared my children with certain more conservative values, let's say.
Okay.
Not hardcore conservative, but like traditional family, more stuff like that. We're not best friends. I'm your dad. You're my kid.
Yeah.
There's a hierarchy here.
Cool.
But what I did was try to encourage them to believe in themselves. There was a time in America and the world before Oprah and Phil and everybody had the talk show and told everybody how to be all touchy-feely and caring with their children, where people really weren't. And kids were kind of chattel. I mean, you're a kid and you shut up, kids would be, seen and not heard and stuff like that.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of touchy-feely. And there was a lot of very pragmatic. You wanted your kids to be prepared for life.
Right.
So when kids like me showed up that were like creative types, the byline we were given was, well, that's nice, but you need a real skill to be able to make your way in the world. You need to be able to have a real skill to have a real job and make money to pay your way. Mm-hmm. You can't just be an XYZ. Well, I told my kids the opposite. I said, you know what? You can do it if you want it. But you got to want it, and you got to do the work. It ain't free, and it ain't cheap, and there's no shortcuts. You can do anything you want. You can be anything you want. I believe it. But I believe that only happens if you do the work.
That's fair.
You don't get it from wishing. You don't get it from hoping. You get it from going and doing. But if you go and do, you can do anything. You can be anything you want to be.
Okay.
And so that's how I got the kids I got. I don't know how. It's sheer quirk of a mistake. That happened to be my tag. That's what I went with. And that's what they did. So, yeah, it's really satisfying. But it's a satisfaction that I know it was, and this is where I was coming to. It was more of a thing where I stayed out of the way less me doing something good than just staying out of the way and letting them do what they need to do.
Yeah.
We overparent sometimes in our fear of
Yes.
not parenting adequately.
Oh my gosh! Come on, do we overparent?
Leave a little space and let them find
Right.
out who they are. Let them discover it. Let them make the mistakes. I know it's hard. I've been through it in the last 2 weeks. Oh, I've been through it. I'm still going. I want to tell them not to, but I can't.
Yeah.
It's not going to do any good. They need their own mistakes to learn it.
Yeah.
If they're gonna own the experience and the knowledge, they're gonna make their own mistakes.
I feel like being a father is like the bumpers on the bowling alley. You're just there if they
Well said.
if they get into the gutter, you're just like, no, get back over here
Yep.
in the middle. And then if they don't do a strike, they still hit. They don't end up in the gutter where it's completely worthless. You're just kind of those bumpers on a bowling alley when, yeah.
The critical skill is knowing when to bump.
Yeah.
You wear yourself out bumping too much. And
Yeah.
you wear your person out if you don't bump in time.
You
So
wear your kids out. Yeah.
It's a game of degrees for sure.
Well, and the truth is, the hardest thing about parenting is you're not prepared for it.
And there's no way to be prepared for it.
And there's no way to be prepared.
And that's mentally, financially, nothing. In any
No.
way, you can't be prepared.
But the cool thing is that you don't have to do it alone. That's the thing. That's why God created the parents. I don't want to be shadow banned here, but I'm going to say it. That's why God created a man and a woman to be the head of the family, specifically the man. The woman falls into that line. They become a one united front. They become one flesh to raise and rear the children. And they don't have to do it alone. They've got God as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Bremel said the thing about, we lose track, and I don't know how people...
Partnership. It's a partnership.
Yeah. People who don't have
Partnership.
faith, I don't know how they negotiate this stuff because they don't have a
Exactly.
partner. They don't have that third
They don't
partner.
have a partner. Yeah.
And he did such a great job of eloquently saying, we don't think about it, but God's like, he's there. He's the partner. He's the partner that's
Yes.
got all the resources. So
Right.
you don't have to freak out.
I don't know if this is airing before or post the rabbi's interview, but you definitely need to listen
Post
to that
on the
because-
schedule, yeah, if you haven't watched it. If you really want a lot of great parenting advice, go back and listen to everything else before this.
Right. I didn't forget about all these other questions.
Yeah, not that this wasn't good, but I mean, there's this whole series is like going through and editing. Like I said, I've had to stop and listen to parts again and go, wow. But yeah, lots of good stuff. Lots of good stuff to get. Scary parts of becoming a father. I don't know what it's like for a boy, but for a girl, the whole prospect of boys, man, entering the picture because you knew it was going to happen and you knew why because you've been a boy at least once.
Yeah.
Boy, that's Let me. Do we make a case for having a strategy ahead of time? Don't wait until the day. Here's a place you want a strategy ahead of time. Here's a place you want to sit down with your spouse and go, what is your vision of how this happens?
And the strategy is not a firearm. That is not the best
Well,
strategy.
the important thing is that you and your
It is a
spouse
strategy.
agree. So if your spouse is down for the firearm, get it. For sure. Because you'll never get a second chance to get the firearm.
Right. Never.
But yeah, you got to have some kind of plan. What are we going to do about dating? Do we believe in dating? Or do we believe in courtship? How do we make that happen? What rules?
Right.
Because you need to. Oh, parents, hear me. If you can hear anything, if you're a parent, if you're a potential parent, your child is going to become interested in members of the opposite sex. Before or by the time they're born, you should be having conversations about how you're going to deal with that when it happens. So you have a plan in place plenty ahead of time, because it's going to happen, and it'll happen in some way you don't expect. At some time when you don't expect, it'll be inconvenient. And if you don't have a plan, you won't be afforded the time to make one then. You'll panic and you'll react and you'll do the wrong thing. And that's the poison of parenting.
That is huge stuff. That is huge.
Poison of parenting is reaction. You do the bad thing, something happens, and you react to it, and you set up this chain reaction.
And how much of parenting is a reaction to the thing that you hear when they come home and say, "Hey, I got a girlfriend."
Can I
And
give
then
you
you react to that.
Yeah. Free parenting advice. Here's the greatest piece of free advice I can give you besides managing expectations. Learn to defang. Defanging as a parent is a critical skill.
And explain to us, Doug, what it means to defang.
I'll give you a real simple example of how I learned about defanging.
Because I did the same thing just a few moments ago out in my living room. But go ahead. Please explain.
As a teenager, I was given to, as teenager heart, to do things to try to shock and jar my parental units.
Yes.
Well, what I learned from that was that I knew how to do that.
Yes.
But what I learned even more is when my children do that, I recognize it.
Right.
This is how we defang. So my children bring me, let's just take an imaginary example, some kind of hip-hop artist that I'm not necessarily that fond of. And they play me this music, hoping to shock me and make me go, dad face. Nah, wrong play. Defang. Ooh, I kind of like this.
Yep.
Pulls the teeth. You can do that in every situation. If you take a minute and don't react, but you got to think about what you're dealing with. They're going to throw something at you because they're teenagers. They're trying to make you go, oh, or react. Don't react. Do not do it. Don't take the bait, no matter what it takes. Bite your lip, bite your tongue, and then make the reaction innocuous. Go along with them or make them think that you are. Take the teeth out. Now you've defanged the thing that imagine they're bringing in a snake and they want to bite you. Oh, you're scared of it. And you just pull the teeth. They go, I'm not scared of it. It's not a snake. That's a worm. I'll show you a real knife.
Right. That's not a knife.
That's the play. That's what you do with your kids. You don't freak out because they're, once they get 13, they're looking for ways to freak you out and mess with you.
Man,
it's adversarial.
Dude. That right there.
I'm handing out gold here.
No, you are, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think at that point, it's like, what other questions are there? If you could defang something that especially your teen or preteen brings to you, where you're like,
here's an exciting discovery.
Oh, really? Okay.
Once you learn to use this strategy with teenagers, you can use it with other adults and actual people who do the same stuff.
That's a whole nother workshop, buddy.
You will catch full-grown adults playing you after this, and you'll go,
absolutely.
Oh, you want to upset me? Oh, well, I'm going to, that does sound good. I'd like that too.
That is called derailing drama. Yeah.
Defang the snake, baby.
Defanging the snake, which I like. I absolutely agree with that 100%. This is gold, man. This is parenting gold.
Trying to do
here, buddy.
We're down to the last question is almost the same as this first question, and it's advice for.
Is it a question or advice?
It's a request for advice for men who hope or plan to become fathers. I'm going to go back to that mate thing.
Okay. Yes, I agree.
Let's be say one. We said communication, and I wanted to pound this drum a little harder, and here's why. Because communication seems obvious. You cannot have a relationship without communication. We all say,
Right.
"Oh yeah, I got it." Here's why I say
But
communication.
let's define communication.
The ability to talk about anything, no matter how difficult. That's what I define communication as.
That's
if
good.
there's something
That's
we
really
can't
good.
talk about, then we're not really communicating.
That's really good.
That's another shocking thing I
Okay.
found. But anyway,
That's good.
you need communication. And you don't need to just have talks about things or be able to have a conversation about things or say, "How was your day?" "Oh, how was your day?"
Yeah,
that's all great. But I'm talking
That's
about,
the worst question you can ever ask.
can you talk about difficult things? Can you talk about uncomfortable things? Here's why I say this. And this is one example. I will make this as generic as possible because I'm not trying to out anybody. People that I love, that I care about,
Neuter.
are
Make it as
in-
neuter.
are Zer, who is in a relationship, and I really care about, with Z. These are two grown adult people, both out of their 20s. We'll say that.
Okay. Okay.
Married,
Okay.
with a child, but almost no ability to communicate about difficult things. Both people, grown adults, dissatisfied in this relationship. But there's no communication. So, you're in a situation you hate. They're in a situation they hate. And the one hope for resolving this stalemate, communication, is off the table. Well, we talk, and we go out, and we do this, and we eat, and we're nice, and we're cordial, and everybody's friendly and pleasant, but everybody just under the surface is starting to get to hostility. Because there are relational expectations that aren't being met.
Yes.
And there's no conversation. So there's no way for those needs to be discussed or coordinated or compromised or worked through.
Right.
Stalemate. Bad. Bitterness. Silence. People who think they're in a relationship but cannot have a simple conversation. That's so disheartening to look at. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Because I ain't a genius. But I know 3-year-olds that could look at this relationship and go, "Well, you guys don't talk."
Yeah. Something broken here.
Yes, this doesn't require a rocket surgeon to fix. It's just, how do you tell these people? How do they come into contact with that information in a meaningful way so that they can begin to have those conversations? See, that's why I want to be the date arbitrator. I want to go to their house and I want to go to the relationship and go, enough.
Right.
You're adults, and now there's a kid in this. Let's end the stalemate
Yeah.
for everybody. Let's find what's best for everybody, and stop huddling up in your corner against
Right.
the person that's supposed to be your partner.
Being belligerent. Yeah.
But that's what happens when you go in there and you ain't got a plan. I didn't have a plan. I had physical attraction, which will last you about, 2 weeks, give or take, right?
Yeah, I think the chemicals last.
I don't know.
3 to
I'm
6
a lot
months.
older now. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it's different as you get older.
It might be hours now. I don't know. It's like,
Yeah. In your timeline, yes, it's ours. So what was the last question?
Advice for men who hope or plan to be fathers.
I think that goes back to the first question that you asked me.
Yeah, as I said,
had.
we've kind of made a full circle here, which is what we
Right.
do. It's our
Right.
thing.
It's our thing.
That my full circle was communication. So
The
what's your
advice
full
is-
circle?
The advice is, if you are considering a contract or a unity or a marriage with someone, that you communicate that information with each other. Yeah, it's all has to do with spouse. It all has to do with the united front. Absolutely. Yeah, communication.
I think you added a syllable. Communication.
Communication.
It's when you talk to people
Communication.
that live near you.
That's
Communication.
right. Yes, communication.
Well, we've
I think
answered
that's
all
exactly
those
what it is.
questions for free again.
With quality insight and wisdom.
Yeah, if you can have a successful marriage and children after this,
From men who have grown children and teenage children.
both,
Yes.
at the same time.
At the same time. Yep. I have a grown child and I have a child that's now moving into that teenage development of, hey, I've been talking with this girl. And
I
I'm like,
know. See, this is going to be a world of
dang.
stuff. You're going to be like the window on the world here, because
I'm the only one of us that's got a boy. That's got a teenage boy. And I
We should have interviewed you. We should have you on the show.
We did.
Okay.
But I just want to say that, you know, it's like we've got all this opportunity to you know, bounce these things off of having daughters, and now I've got a teenage son, and I'm like, I just, you know, and what you were saying about defanging, that
You said you got to apply that today, so yeah.
I did, and it's like I want to have those conversations with him and just go, oh really, that's cool. And I don't think he wants to say something shocking to me, because he's a lot like me. He doesn't want to shock people.
No.
He wants to kind of lightly slide these things in and then see how I respond. Just kind of sliding.
He wants to be like water. He's like water.
Like sliding a note under the door and waiting for you to say something and
see if anybody
listening for
yells.
your response on the other side of the door going, oh, what? And I'm just like, hey, that's cool. What's happening? What you can tell me about that? And it's really cool, because he's a lot like me in those sense. I think probably, you know, you took the Enneagram, and I think he's probably like a 5, probably a 7, like, you know, me with a 6 wing, maybe. I don't know. But I had that opportunity tonight to be able to kind of de-escalate or defang that, to be like, oh, cool, that's cool. So she said this, and you said that, and that's cool. All right, great. But it's like, and I catalog those things as a father back in the back of my mind. So when I'm in the car with him later, as we're going to drop off for school or going to the gym or whatever, I'm like, hey, so tell me about what she said or what she did. How'd you respond to that? And it becomes a conversation rather than oh, you should not, or you should always think of, or you should think about this. It becomes a conversation. And I think that's the most important thing about fatherhood. Is it needs
So you're changing your answer now?
Well,
I'm being silly.
it needs to be an open conversation. If you can't keep the
Isn't that
conversation
great?
open- yes, it is great.
It is. Because and relationships of all kind again benefit from this. But go ahead.
Because
Sorry,
when you can and what you're absolutely saying, when you defang, tabooize, I don't know, that's a word I'm making up. When you could take things that are taboo and put them down here on the bottom shelf and create a conversation with your children, with your offspring, and go, hey, that's cool. What do you think about this? What do you think about this? And then you open those conversations up later in life to be like, hey, I have to tell you about what happened on this date. Okay, I'm listening. Go ahead.
Right.
Those are the moments you want to be involved in and not have an emotional volcano eruption about and say, man, that sucks, or yeah, that's really cool, or okay, where can we go from here? How can we fix this for you? Or how can we, you see what I'm saying? It's like, and I think so often as parents, we become the volcano of eruption.
Oh, sure. The reaction.
The reaction of things that we're not just, like you said, I think that's it, is defanging.
I've thought so many times while nephew was here that I would love to have some of your experience and insight in dealing with boys, because he's very much like dealing with a boy, and I don't have any of those skills. But the one thing we've talked about this over and over again, the open conversation.
Yes.
That and this we've talked about more in a context of Christianity and winning fights and winning arguments. And that winning the argument is not as valuable as, drumroll please, keeping the conversation open.
Yes.
You can destroy someone in an argument and win
Yes.
and feel like,
But
ha-ha.
why?
But
Why?
that's the end of the conversation. You never get
Exactly.
to have that conversation again.
Do you want to be right or do you want to have a relationship?
Do you want to be right or do you want to keep having the conversation? Yeah.
Right.
Do you want the relationship? That's golden.
And what are those things that you can help? And here's for fathers. What are those things that you can help create opportunity to have those conversations on a regular basis? You know, for me and my son, it's like we're going to the gym a couple times a week. We're hanging out together. We have opportunity for open conversations. So, dude, tell me about what she said. Tell me about how you felt about when she said that about you, whatever. You know, I'm having those, you know, my wife insisted that we have a date with my daughter. So I go out with my daughter and I open the door for her and I show her things and I you know, pay for the meal. And what do you think about that? How does that feel?
One more reason to be glad I'm not married to her.
But those are things that are important. You know, that goes back to that other question of displaying what it means to be masculine to a female. What it means to have feminine traits to a male. All those things, you have to have that. I think it's very important. It's very good. Yeah. I like it.
I love your vacillating answer at the end. That's my favorite new thing. Maybe not. I don't know. It could be. Fact check.
Could be. Well, you know, I want to be humble in the fact that I could be completely wrong. I don't know.
I appreciate that about you.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I was going to say another thing in there, and now I don't remember. But probably something I've already said at some point in the past. If I know me, I've probably already said it.
All right.
And so I hope those answered all of your questions. And now you're fully informed about how to be a dad. So go out there and procreate. Go on out there and get on out there and
you know.
no. But hey, can I
have some information?
Can I say one more thing that I think is probably the most important thing that I want to say?
Please.
And we've said a lot of there's a lot of important
We have said
stuff.
a lot of things that are probably important or not.
This podcast is not like other podcasts. We don't do a lot of stuff for money. There's not monetization. We're not throwing merch at you. There's no Patreon to go get special. This is it. This is everything we got. It's not everything we got. If you are a husband or a dad or just a dude who needs somebody to talk to, needs some perspective, which is critically important to us, don't be alone. Give us a call. Shoot us a message. We got a DM. We got an email. You know what? You can check with other people that hang out with us and show up here, even though it's a small number. When you send us a message, you actually get a reply from one of us,
from
not
one of
someone
us.
else.
Yes.
So we're here. If you've got a question, if you think of a question while you were watching this, and you think, "Oh, I wish I could ask me," bingo, send it in. Shoot it to us.
Yeah.
It won't even be an episode. We'll write you back and go, "Here's the thing. Here's the deal." So I just wanted to say, you may feel all alone. You may be alone. You may think of more questions. We're still here. It's a relationship. We're here to communicate.
There is no reason for any man to journey through this life alone. When you have people like us that are
Yes.
like, "Hey, here we are. We're ready for you."
We're here to laugh with you. We're not laughing at you. We're laughing with you.
Laughing with you.
And thank you for joining us for yet another fine, fun-loving episode of the Gentlementors.
The Gentlementor.